I'm Angela Briggs with WCLU News. I'm sitting down today with Glasgow attorney Ken Garrett. How are you doing this evening?
Doing good.
Now, everybody who has paid any kind of attention to the news lately or has basically had any contact with local media has definitely heard your name in connection with the recent Anthony Barbour trial. So now first tell us a little bit about yourself. You practice here in Glasgow?
Practice here in Glasgow, primarily do criminal defense. I do some personal injury, some family law, but my passion is criminal defense.
So now I can remember back in May of 2015, I was in Temple Hill, saw the massive law enforcement presence. I mean, it was unlike, I hadn't seen anything like that since I've been covering news. So when did you first hear about Laney Wallace and Anthony Barbour and that whole situation?
Probably during the week of the state police manhunt. And then, of course, I heard bits and pieces of the news throughout that week until ultimately he was arrested.
So when did you decide to take on that case?
Within days of his arrest, I was in communications with the family, and it kind of went from there.
Now that wasn't an easy case to cover. I mean, just the details alone were pretty rough as far as Laney was 2 years old. She was found in the well. So, I mean, did you always feel good about taking that case on?
Well, here's the thing about criminal defense. A lot of people have the mistaken impression that a criminal defense attorney tries to get people off, and that's simply not the most appropriate way to look at the role of a criminal defense attorney. The best way that I can explain to you what the role of a criminal defense attorney is as follows. If you were charged with a murder and Charles Manson was charged with a murder, obviously one of you all deserves more punishment than the other.
Right.
So my role, and I think the role of a criminal defense attorney in the legal process, is to find out what measure of justice each one person would deserve for his conduct. Obviously, the more times you've been in the system, the harsher the punishment the system will met out. If you've not been in the system very frequently, then obviously the system tends to give you some clemency in your wrongful actions. And so, my role as a criminal defense attorney is basically to see that justice is meted out only in a measure which is appropriate to the conduct and appropriate to the person. But then also my role as a criminal defense attorney is to bring truth to light. And I think that's probably the most important aspect of the Barbour case is that, so many people were already engulfed in the passions and the, the convictions of their consciences. And certainly that's a human element to the system that anytime we hear of something which first pierces our ears as something maybe of a heinous nature, we are very quick to judge and without seeing the evidence. And so probably the most, the gravest concern that I had in this case was the atmosphere, the attitudes of the community. And so it was important for us to kind of tone down what the attitude was and the temperament and explain basically factually what had happened. Obviously, like I said, anytime you have a small child, anytime there are allegations of any type of abuse, whether that be physical or sexual abuse, our hearts quickly will judge. And so what had to happen in this case was there had to be a break or an arrest or some restraint on the passions which are normally fueled in our stomachs. And so that was probably the biggest obstacle to defending this case. And certainly it was something that, much like the surgeon with the scalpel, it took a very delicate act in excising what the truth was. And I think that, we accomplished that pretty ably.
And, one thing about this case is that every time you were in court, the media was there. They followed this case from the beginning to end. So can you talk a little bit about how that affected your job?
Well, I think, just to be very candid, the media was our friend in this case. And it was a friend to Mr. Barbour. From the very beginning, I took very calculated steps in what I told the media. Obviously, for his defense, we certainly didn't come out with the truth early on. I do recall one interview, I think it was back in last October with WBKO, where I did state that, what we hope to do is turn the table and hope to shed light on kind of what has happened. And obviously we did not, give all that information to the media in one sit-down feeding. It was spoonful at a time, basically every time that I had an interaction with them, so that there was some control from our part
Right.
as to what came out and what level of attention was given to the case, what level of mystery was given to the case. And so in essence, by the media's presence continually at court, it basically gave us an outlet to share bits about the case
Right.
that could at least give some tantalizing information about what was to come.
Now, speaking of tantalizing information, I can remember the blue shirt when that was first talked about in court. Basically, you never said directly, but you definitely alluded to the fact that that was a key piece of evidence, and then it's gone. So, can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of impact that had?
The significance of the blue shirt was simply this. The only thing that law enforcement had, the only thing that we had was Mr. Barbour's statement. Now obviously, Mr. Barbour gave a statement as far as the truth prior to Mr. Alan Barbour finding the shirt. And so that statement was a naked statement. There was nothing to corroborate it. So when we were actually meeting, I did ask Anthony, how can we be so sure of what you're saying? And so when he revealed that the shirt was actually thrown out the window at Antioch Church Road and Nobob Road, it gave us perhaps a possibility to corroborate what he said and to clothe, literally,
Right.
his naked assertion. And so in going out there and Mr. Barbour finding the shirt, what that did is, number one, it gave some physical evidence of what the defendant was saying. But more importantly, the shirt itself contained physical evidence of the alleged events. And, there's basically two types of physical evidence that we were looking for on that shirt. Now, here's the other thing that I should tell you before I get into that is, we did not know what was going to be on the shirt.
Right.
We had no idea what would be on there. We had no idea what the lab would say. Our intention was not to somehow bring a shirt to the table, which they could then test and they would find these results of which we knew.
Right.
That was not the case. This was a bare, barren belief that something may be on there. And so the two parts of the evidence which appeared on the shirt that we thought could be there were either hairs of the mother. Obviously, there would be hairs of the child because Mr. Barbour had revealed that the mother had drugged the child by the hair of the head. Obviously, we would suspect that hairs would have fallen off the child's head and could have rested peacefully up on, the collar of the shirt. And lo and behold, we did find that to be true. The second thing we were hopeful of is that there would be some type of other DNA evidence. Now, we weren't clear what was going to be on that shirt. And so that was the whole reason with taking this physical evidence to law enforcement.
Right.
There was a big to-do about, or a big, much ado made about nothing about, we could have sent that shirt off to our own lab. Well, can you imagine the scenario that if we were at a murder crime scene and there was a gun and we decided to pick that gun up and send it off to the lab? All of us know how many people would be indicted in that.
Right.
So for anyone to suggest that we should have sent that shirt to the lab is nothing more than an excuse. But back to the other piece of evidence, the second piece of evidence we were looking for is some type of physical DNA. We did not know whether or not the child's blood would be on there, although if you look at the pictures, the exhibits which were entered into evidence at trial, on I think it's the left side of the shirt, on the side where the Donald Duck's hat appears in the musical note, you will see spots of red. And I will always believe that that's blood. Now, I understand that the lab tech said that nothing tested positive for blood. Of course, the test which tests positive, or the test which they use to test blood, is the phenolphthalein test. And certainly the phenolphthalein test, like every test made by human hands, is susceptible of error.
And you were unable to have that independently tested because it was gone.
That's right. So if the shirt had not been lost or misplaced, then certainly we would have had the physical opportunity to have a lab of our own choosing to test that. And they could have run, a phenolphthalein test. They could have even run more sensitive tests designed to pick up even the slightest amounts of DNA. But because that shirt and the truth ended up at the bottom of a landfill in Frankfurt, we were essentially deprived of our opportunity to do that. And certainly that opportunity and that benefit of testing the shirt would have inured to Mr. Barbour, but unfortunately, that was something that was taken from him.
Right.
Is his ability to test that shirt. I mean, can you imagine sitting in a chair in court with your lawyer, knowing that the one piece of evidence that you would have liked to be tested
I cannot imagine
is
that.
forever gone?
Right.
Can you imagine sitting there thinking that my penalty range for these allegations is 20 to 50 or life? Can you imagine
No. Mm-mm.
going through our justice system, which is designed to prevent these sorts of issues? Can you imagine going through that, knowing that the one piece of evidence that you have brought to the table, given to the trusted hands of the Kentucky State Police, is now gone?
Now that then too, I was going to say, combined with, their evidence was they had him on tape saying one thing.
That's correct.
But then here's something that that I know you guys definitely were, felt really good about, and then it's gone. So how did his confession on tape, you think, play in as far as the evidence? I mean, how hard was that to overcome?
Well, I think confession is probably too strong a term. I think what his statements were on tape were responsibility statements. We learned at trial that there were several things that Mr. Barbour did in order to place upon his shoulders the responsibility for this child's death. And he did this with full knowledge that someone else had committed the crime. But he was willing to sacrifice himself and go and sit in the county jail and even the state penitentiary for another individual's wrongdoing. The statements themselves, certainly they were hard to overcome, because as we sat in the courtroom and listened to, 2 or 3 of the recorded statements and obviously the alleged details that he was providing law enforcement, which honestly he kind of echoed or parroted those back to the officers who continued to spoon feed him basically details of the crime, some of which he wasn't aware, and so he kind of made some of them up on the fly, but he also kind of spoon fed them back and even said it on the stand that he told them what they wanted to hear. And so really it was kind of a perfect storm for his ability to take responsibility, because you have 3 eager detectives who were anxious to get at the truth, 3 eager detectives who wanted to, let's say, put the nails in the coffin on this case. And once they were able to ask him several questions about this, and he was spoon-feeding them exactly what they had given him, then, honestly, for them it worked out. For him it did not. But the way we were able to counter that is that we really just gave an explanation to the jury of the truth, which is Anthony was willing to take the blame upon himself for this offense. And probably the thing that helped us out the most is the pictures. Because law enforcement at every crime scene, and this is probably the most helpful thing that happens in a criminal case, is that when law enforcement takes pictures of the crime scene, there are literally thousands and thousands of details which are memorialized forever on a single piece of paper.
Like the disinfecting wipes.
Like the disinfectant wipes located next to the yellow blowtorch on the kitchen table.
Right.
And so in looking and analyzing these pictures, you're able to tell a story as to what happened before the pictures were taken. And this is something that I will approach, and I have approached, and even in the past, I was successful in another murder case getting it to a reckless, even though the defendant admitted 3 times on tape that he actually committed the crime. But pictures are a necessary tool to finding the truth. And so the pictures that we were able to look at that were given to us courtesy of the state police revealed several things. They revealed that there was disinfectant wipes not only on the kitchen table in an open position with a wipe sticking out.
And that's something that you mentioned in the beginning and then finally brought full circle.
Right. And then there was one on the staircase, another can of disinfectant wipes. Now, no disrespect to anyone involved, but, and my house has looked this way before as well, but when you have a pigsty and then you have sporadic cans of disinfectant wipe scattered throughout the home, some of which are open, it makes you wonder, is this person doing some spring cleaning or are they doing spot cleaning?
Right.
And,